This is the Olympus M.Zuiko Digital 25mm F1.8 Micro Four Third lens with the model number EZ-M2518. So the model number, the 25, refers to the focal length, which is 25mm, and the 18 refers to the maximum aperture, which is f1.8. This lens was announced in January 2014. It's made out of plastic, unlike the 12mm and the 17mm. It weighs 137 grams and its length is 4.2 centimeters. So that's 4.2 centimeters protruding from the part which is connected to the camera. So from here up to the front of the lens is 4.2 centimeters. Its filter thread is 46 millimeters, as you can see there, and it has a maximum aperture of f1.8. And the minimum aperture that it can be set to is f22. It has 7 aperture blades, and it does have a lens hood thread, unlike the 12mm and the 17mm, but the lens hood thread is actually hidden, so you have to unscrew this ring, take it off, and there you can see the lens hood thread. And the lens hood for this is the Olympus LH-49B. So there you can see the lens with the lens hood attached to see how tall it is. And this is just to give you a relative comparison in my hand. So the lens hood is made out of plastic, unlike the 12mm and the 17mm lenses. So Olympus M.Zuiko has a range of lenses. So the 12mm f2, then there's a 17mm f1.8, then there's this one, which is a 25mm f1.8, then there's a 45mm f1.8, and a 75mm f1.8. So these seem to be all the lenses in the same series of M.Zuiko lenses, even though they have slightly different attributes. So it has a focus ring, as you can see, so it's an electronic focus ring. And there's no manual focus clutch, so you can't pull the focus ring back and do manual focus, which you could do on the 12mm and the 17mm. And the closest focusing distance for this lens is 25 centimeters, and it has a diagonal angle of view of 47 degrees. So in terms of disadvantages, this lens doesn't really have any disadvantages. I guess the only things you could mention was it doesn't have a focus clutch like the 12mm and the 17mm or the Pro series lenses. And it's not weather sealed like the M.Zuiko Pro series. The image quality is quite good, not as good as the Pro series, but still really good. There's no major problems with it, whether we're talking about artifacting, ghosting, or chromatic aberration or distortion. And I think that's the case for lenses that are 25mm focal length or above, whereas with the wider angle lenses, it's more likely to find lenses that have various negative attributes such as distortion or chromatic aberration or ghosting and that kind of stuff. So the advantages of this lens is that it's small, it's light, it has a maximum aperture of f1.8 and a minimum aperture of f22. So to compare this lens to other lenses, I would say the closest comparison is the Panasonic Lumix 25mm f1.7. So these two lenses are almost identical. So I have this one here, I have the lens hood on. Let me see if I can take the lens hood off first. And I'm gonna twist on the lens hood on the Panasonic lens as well, so that you can see the difference in size here. So the Olympus lens is smaller by 1 centimeter. So the Panasonic lens weighs 125 grams, whereas the Olympus lens weighs 137 grams. So the Olympus lens is 12 grams heavier, but that's marginally. The difference isn't big enough to be noticed. In terms of length, the Panasonic lens is 5.2 centimeters, so it's slightly longer than the Olympus lens, which is 4.2 centimeters, so 1 centimeter longer. The maximum aperture on the Lumix lens is f1.7. Let's see if it says it here anywhere on the lens. Okay, it doesn't say it on the lens, but it's f1.7. It says it. Yeah, there. I don't know if you can see this. Inside the lens, it does mention that it's f1.7. And the Olympus lens is f1.8. So the Olympus lens is marginally less bright, but the difference is so small that I don't think you will realize any difference between these two lenses in terms of weight, size, maybe size a little bit, but in terms of weight or aperture, I don't think there's any real difference between them. And both of them have a minimum aperture of f22, whereas the maximum aperture is f1.8 on the Olympus and f1.7 on the Panasonic one. So there's one problem with the Panasonic lens, and that's that it has a focus shift problem. So it front focuses a little bit, and because of that, I can't really recommend the Panasonic lens. So I think if you're looking for a small and light 25mm lens, it's better to go with the Olympus one, because I don't think the 0.1 f-stop makes any difference in real life situations, but I think the focus shifting problem on the Panasonic lens will be a problem. Essentially, you'll get lower quality images if your image is not in focus. So I don't think this will be a problem once you start to step up the aperture. So I think probably after f5.6 you probably won't notice it, but it is there. Another comparison of the Olympus lens is to compare it to the Panasonic Leica 25mm F1.8 Mark II. So I don't have that lens, so I can't show it, but that lens weighs 205 grams, so it's obviously heavier than the Olympus lens, and has a length of 5.45 centimeters, so it's obviously quite a bit bigger as well. And it has a maximum aperture of f1.4, so the aperture is quite a bit brighter, and you'll be able to get more shallow depth of field on that one. But the minimum aperture on that one is f16, whereas the minimum aperture on the Olympus lens is f22. But that lens is highly praised for its image quality and sharpness, so if you're willing to go with something a little bit heavier and a little bit bigger, then you'll have the advantage of having a better lens with an f1.4 aperture. So the Panasonic Leica 25mm f1.4 Mark II is definitely better than the Olympus one, but it has its own disadvantages in that it's heavier, it's bigger, and its minimum aperture is f16. Another comparison for the 25mm is the Olympus M.Zuiko Pro 25mm f1.8. This lens weighs 410 grams, which is 3 times heavier than the normal M.Zuiko lens, and it's 8.7 centimeters, which is twice as long as this one. So I've got the lens hood on this one and not on the other one, so let me take off the lens hood so that you can see the difference in size. So there you can see how much bigger it is. So this one, the Pro one, is 8.7 centimeters, whereas the normal M.Zuiko one is 4.2 centimeters. The maximum aperture on the Pro one is f1.2, so it's significantly brighter than this one, and f1.2 is probably some of the brightest lenses that you can get on Micro Four Thirds, particularly of this quality with the Olympus branding, and you obviously get a lot of shallow depth of field with that, so if you're doing portrait photography, that could be quite good. The minimum aperture on this one is f16, whereas on this one is f22. The closest focusing distance on the M.Zuiko Pro is 30 centimeters, whereas on the normal M.Zuiko one is 25 centimeters. So the closest focusing distance for the normal M.Zuiko is actually better in a way, since it's 25 centimeters. So if you wanted to get a shot where you have everything in focus, then you could have the M.Zuiko set to f22, and since its minimum focus distance is 25, that also gives you an idea of how much you would have in focus. So if having as much as possible in focus, then in theory this one is better. But once you start going up to f22, your image quality might degrade, so even though it sounds good in theory, that might not actually work out well in practice. In terms of aperture blades, the M.Zuiko Pro has 9 aperture blades, whereas the normal M.Zuiko one has 7 aperture blades, which means the background blur on the M.Zuiko Pro will look nicer. And the M.Zuiko Pro has weather sealing to IPX1 rating, and it also has a lens function button, so you can assign that to whatever functionality you want on the camera. And the M.Zuiko Pro also has a focusing clutch, so I can pull this back and it will reveal the distance, and I can use it to do manual focusing. So this is something that the normal M.Zuiko lens doesn't have, even though the 12mm and 17mm for the same series of lenses did have that feature. So when you compare these two lenses, the real question is, are you willing to carry something this big and this heavy in order to get all the benefits that the M.Zuiko Pro lens can provide? So I think a lot of the time the small lens might be a better choice because you can pack a lot of these small lenses in your camera bag and have more choice. Whereas with this one, you have the higher quality, the weather sealing, and all the different advantages, but it's bigger and heavier. So this might be better for studio work, although the fact that it's weather sealed means it's also better for outdoors if you're in certain conditions, whereas this one is the small and light one, which is easier to carry. So each of these lenses have their own advantages and disadvantages. There's no obvious choice on when to use which one, but it really depends on how you want to use the lens and what your situation is that you're photographing or filming in. Overall, I think this is a good lens and I would recommend it, and if you have any questions then let me know. And I just like to reiterate the fact that when you buy this lens you have to take off the ring before you can attach the lens hood. I am going to include the unboxing in the video just so that in case someone wants to know what actually comes in the box, they can see what the details are. So this is the box, and on the side of the box it tells you that what the bag is that comes with this lens, and also what the filter thread size is, so 46mm. And it also mentions that this lens is the equivalent of 50mm on a full frame camera. So there's the warranty card, not much of interest. And there's this leaflet which indicates that Olympus Corporation will change its name to OM Digital Solutions. And then this is the manual for the lens. I mean, there isn't much to the lens, but let me just actually open it and see what it says. So here you have the spec of the lens, from the how much it weighs, what the length is, the lens hood, and angle of view, maximum aperture. So here you have also the numbering for the figure in which the lens is shown. So let me see. Okay, so this is the image, and those numbers correlate to this. And this is the lens, and I think that's the only thing that comes in the box.